Get ready to dive into the world of Nebbiolo. And believe me, there's a lot more to it than just your Barolo and Barbaresco. This is going to be fun. You ready?
Oh, Nebbiolo is a really special grape. Even its history is kind of mysterious.
Right, like something out of an Italian movie, all those vineyards in the mist. Speaking of, is that where the name comes from? Like Nebbia, the fog?
A popular theory, yeah. Linking the name to the fog during harvest in the Piedmont region where it grows.
Hmm.
But then some folks think it's about the look of the grapes themselves. They get kind of a whitish coating, almost misty looking.
Both are pretty poetic when you think about it. But name aside, what is it about Nebbiolo that makes it stand out?
Well, Nebbiolo is known for being, how do I put this? It can be a bit demanding, both when you're growing it and, well, when you're drinking it. Needs the right conditions, you see.
So a bit of a diva, huh? But I've heard it makes some of the most age-worthy wines out there, so it must be worth the effort.
Oh, absolutely. The structure of Nebbiolo is key here. See, those tannins, they can be quite strong when the wine is young. They would give it the potential to age so well, like they protect the wine, let it develop over time.
Like a time capsule waiting to be opened. So let's say we open that time capsule, we pour a glass of Nebbiolo. What should we expect?
Imagine a symphony of aromas. When it's young, you might get these delicate floral notes, like roses, violets, but as it ages, oh, that gets really interesting. Earthy aromas, leather, truffles, even hints of tar.
Okay, that's not your average wine tasting note. It's a whole sensory experience. Definitely not your typical fruity kind of wine.
Exactly. Nebbiolo makes you pay attention. You gotta savor it, appreciate how the flavors change in your mouth.
Speaking of, you mentioned those strong tannins earlier. What does that actually feel like for someone who maybe hasn't tried Nebbiolo before?
Imagine that slightly astringent feeling you get from strong black tea. That's tannins. And in a young Nebbiolo, they're pretty prominent. It's part of what gives the wine structure, helps it age.
They soften over time, though, right?
Yes, precisely. As Nebbiolo ages, the tannins become smoother, more integrated. But there's another important factor at play here. Acidity.
Acidity, the backbone of a good wine, they say. How does that play into Nebbiolo?
Think of acidity like the conductor of an orchestra. It provides balance, freshness, vibrancy, especially against those bold flavors and tannins. It brings everything together, you see.
So we've got these tannins, the acidity, this whole complex aroma profile. It's a lot going on in one glass. But I have to admit, when I think Nebbiolo, my mind goes straight to Barolo and Barbaresco.
Rightfully so. They are the big names, the ones people usually associate with Nebbiolo.
But there's more to it than just those two.
Oh, absolutely. Think of Barolo and Barbaresco as like the starting point. Nebbiolo is incredibly versatile. It can really shine in other parts of Italy, too.
Wait, so it's like Nebbiolo has these aliases it goes by in other regions.
In a way, yeah. Like, head over to Lombardy, you'll find it called Chiavenasca. And then there's Valle d'Aosta, where they call it Picotendro.
Different names, different personalities.
Exactly. Each region has its own unique terroir, its own way of making wine, and that comes through in the Nebbiolo. It's a grape that really reflects where it's grown.
Like it has a passport full of stamps, each one telling a story about a different place.
I like that. And the story doesn't end in Italy either. Nebbiolo is making its way around the world now. Winemakers everywhere are starting to take notice.
So it's like a global traveler picking up new experiences along the way.
Exactly. From the U.S. to Australia, Argentina, Chile, people are realizing what this grape can do.
This makes me want to go on a Nebbiolo tasting tour. But before we do that, one of the articles mentions something that I always find makes a good wine even better: food pairings. What goes well with a Nebbiolo?
Now you're talking. Nebbiolo is fantastic with food. That structure, those tannins, they really complement certain dishes, especially richer flavors.
So give me the classics. What should I serve at my next Nebbiolo dinner party?
Well, you can't go wrong with red meat, especially gamey meats like wild boar or venison. Imagine that with a nice hearty stew. The flavors just hold up so well to the Nebbiolo.
I can almost taste it. The tender meat, that savory sauce, and a glass of Nebbiolo.
It's a match made in heaven. And then for something a little different, but still a classic pairing, aged cheese. Like a good Parmigiano Reggiano. The nutty, salty notes go perfectly with something like a Barolo.
Parmigiano Reggiano and Barolo, it's like they were meant to be together.
Absolutely. The flavors just play off of each other so well. But don't be afraid to think outside the box either. Nebbiolo can surprise you with some more unusual pairings.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What are some of those unexpected combinations? Hit me with those unexpected pairings. I'm ready to get adventurous.
Well, remember those earthy aromas we talked about?
Yeah, like the leather, the truffles.
Exactly. So think about ingredients like mushrooms, truffles, even lentils or root vegetables. They can have that earthiness too.
Ah, so the earthiness in the food and the wine sort of play off each other.
That's the idea. And here's one that might surprise you. Nebbiolo can actually be great with spicy Asian food.
Wait, really? Spicy Asian food and Nebbiolo? That's not a combination I would have thought of.
I know it seems strange, but trust me. Something with a bit of heat, like Szechuan peppercorns, the tannins in Nebbiolo can actually help tone down the spiciness. And then you get that subtle fruitiness from the wine coming through.
Okay, you've convinced me I'm going to have to be more adventurous with my pairings. Nebbiolo really keeps you guessing. Speaking of, one of the articles mentioned something about different winemaking styles for Nebbiolo, like traditional versus modern.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have these two schools of thought, both trying to make the best possible Nebbiolo, but they have different approaches.
So less about right and wrong, more about a spectrum of style.
Exactly. The traditionalists, they might age the wine for a really long time, like weeks, to get those tannins and that deep color. And they often use those big old oak vats. Let the wine mature slowly.
It's like they're honoring the history of the wine, letting it age the way it has for centuries.
It's a good way of putting it. Now, the modernists, they might do things a bit differently. Shorter aging time, temperature control during fermentation, maybe use smaller oak barrels, the new ones, to get different flavors.
So it's a balance between tradition and innovation. But it seems like there's a growing movement that tries to bridge the two, organic and biodynamic winemaking.
Absolutely. More and more Nebbiolo producers are going that route. They
Hmm.
realize that working with nature, it's not just better for the environment, it can also make a more interesting wine.
Because in the end, terroir is everything for a wine like this, right? It's about where it comes from.
Precisely. It's about capturing that sense of place, the vineyard, the soil, everything. And that actually brings us to another important topic, something that all winemakers are thinking about these days: climate change.
Right, and we were talking earlier about how Nebbiolo needs those specific conditions to thrive. How are they dealing with that?
They're adapting. Some are looking at different vineyard sites, maybe higher altitudes where it's cooler. Others are changing how they manage the vines themselves, protecting them from too much sun.
So climate change is changing the very landscape of Nebbiolo in a way.
You could say that. But I think it's amazing to see how these winemakers are responding, the creativity and the dedication, all to protect this amazing grape.
It sounds like Nebbiolo is in good hands.
I believe so.
Well, this has been quite a journey. We've covered so much about Nebbiolo, from its mysterious past to the challenges it faces in the future. If our listeners take away one thing from this deep dive, what would you want it to be?
Don't be afraid to try new things. Go beyond the familiar names and discover the diversity of Nebbiolo. You never know what hidden gem you might find.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, I think it's time to track down a bottle of Nebbiolo. Cheers to the Queen of Piedmont, a truly captivating grape.
Cheers to that.